Yeah, I think administrative support's the key to any successful culture. And how I got it is building trust. You build trust with administrators because yearbook advisors in general, they're kind of on an island at their school. No one else is doing what they're doing. No one really understands it. And if anything, a lot of administrators call it a headache a lot of times. So what I tried to do is build trust from the get-go, and that involved honest, open communication between myself and my leadership team, my editors, where they would have conversations with my principal and the assistant principals weekly, just kind of letting them know what we were doing, more importantly, why we were doing it, so that they weren't caught off guard or surprised with anything we're doing. We invited the administrators to come to our space anytime they wanted to hang around and talk because it's not a traditional classroom. So the more we talked and the more they visited, the more they understood what we were doing and what I was trying to accomplish, building this autonomous program in which I empowered student leaders to kind of take ownership of this authentic, real product that is unlike any other kind of thing at a school. Closest thing I might equate it to is maybe like a drama program where the kids are kind of on stage performing and producing. That's kind of your booking. The kids are producing and creating and then showing their homework to the public. So having that administrative support was just paramount to really let me know that they believe and trusted me. And then in turn, I could tell the kids, I believe and trust in you. And then that allowed them to create magic and just kind of be okay with taking risks and failing and growing and really throwing themselves into the process.
All right. Now, the obvious follow-up question I think here is you said 27 years there. I can't imagine you had the same administrator all 27 years. Did you ever, or did your group ever have pushback on a story, on a topic, on something that they told the administrator they want to do? Did you ever have that kind of pushback?
Yes, and at Kirkwood, I did have two principals during my tenure there, and they both kind of ran under the same philosophy of we are supporters of the First Amendment. And I know Dr. Mike Havener, my last principal, said to me a few times, it's not always that I like what the kids are putting in the yearbook or the news magazine, but I support it, and that's journalism. So they were always wanting more transparency. Um, Both he and Dr. Holly. And when blowback did happen, when people from the community did complain, they never wavered. They always said it's the kid's right to do it, and what they did isn't wrong or false. It's the truth. And really, they're just trying to spur discussion. And through journalism, we educate and hopefully make progress. So instead of having each side yelling at each other, maybe we can read and talk and discuss and maybe get somewhere.
You mentioned the key word earlier that I've hit a lot of times in over 20 years of doing this is it's hard to say, but a lot of administrators don't trust students. They just don't trust them. Clearly yours did. Again, for anybody listening that's in that scenario where they're thinking, boy, I'd like to do more, but our administrators just don't trust these kids. I mean, they're just never going to trust. How do you change that? How do you, as the advisor, or how do you, your students, how do you change that to head down a more positive road?
Yeah, that's a great question because I think more programs are in that spot than they were in my spot at Kirkwood. So what I would tell advisors and tell students is that it takes time and it needs to start with communication and it needs to start and then after communication it's you have to do good journalism. And once you show that you can be trusted with good journalism, then it's baby steps into covering maybe the more sensitive topics or controversial topics. And when you start to do that, you have to be transparent with that communication. This is what we want to cover, why we want to cover it, and how we're going to cover it. And we're not advocating. We just kind of want to cover real topics. I always told my kids, if the students are talking about it, we have to find a way to cover it. Because if we're not really time stamping the year in our annual. And sometimes that happens to be what kids are talking about from 3 to 9, not 9 to 3. So it's always informing the principals. Here's what we're doing and why, and it's building trust. And I do think that takes time in a program, and it's incremental. But once you gain that trust, you start to build partnerships rather than this combativeness that I see at some schools where it's no, you can't do that, and then it's a fight. And I always preach to my kids, we should never have combative conversations with administrators. It should always be partnerships. So let's work on that. The last thing I'll say is sometimes you do concede. Um, you are in a high school or middle school and the rules are different. So sometimes it's saying, okay, we won't do this, and oh, they want us to do this. So sure, let's do this if the principal wants us to cover it. Well, so maybe next time when we want to do something, he or she'll say, sure, why don't you do that too?